Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Larry Live, Tax Talk for Tax Professionals. I'm Larry Mellon, Senior Director of Global Tax and the Chief Tax Officer at Vertex. Every company has a strategy and KPIs that they follow to drive towards success. Some organizations might even have a strategy office to focus precisely on the creation and execution of a corporate strategy. Today's episode, we are joined by Anila Venkat, VP of Strategy and Innovation at Vertex, in our Chief Strategy Office. Anila, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Larry. Excited to talk to you about our topic here today.
Great. So let's start with defining a term that a lot of business leaders use, but includes many layers. Anila, can you break down what strategy means?
Absolutely. The word strategy is tossed around a lot, and to be honest, it has a lot of different meanings. So, if we were to abstract what does strategy mean, think about it like a game plan that takes the strengths of an individual business and brings those together to achieve an outcome for the business. So if you think about sports, you'll have teams that design specific plays that both exploit their own team's strengths and then also expose maybe the opposing team's weaknesses. So it's very similar, kind of bringing all those ingredients together is what strategy is, all in service to an end outcome. So, again, bringing it back to what does it mean in the corporate world? Um, Strategy is really what defines the direction and focus of an organization with the goal of achieving long-term value for all stakeholders. And that means customers, shareholders, if it's a public company, employees, partners, etc. At the top level, there are many layers to strategy again. At the top level, it'll start with a vision and a mission. So why does the organization exist? Right? Answering that question sets the foundation for everything else. After there's clarity around that question comes the enterprise strategy. So where do we want to play and how do we want to win at the highest level? That will include things such as defining what types of customer segments do we go after, what geographies do we focus on, what are our core offerings and value proposition, and the like. After the enterprise strategy is set, you start to get more into the how. So what specific market opportunities do we see that we should pursue? What's a winning product strategy that really delivers on a core problem or market need? And how do you plan to reach that market or customer segment? After you start to get more into that how, when you think about an organization, there are many functions, and at the base you have functional and operational strategy too. And so that will cover things such as IT strategy, finance strategy, and the like. So there are numerous meanings to the word strategy, and that sort of just paints a little bit of a picture of how those different layers come together.
That's really helpful. Thank you. I can see how each layer of strategy really builds upon, one before it. And it's tiers and it keeps continuing to build up there. It makes sense how they kind of all together. An organization can create a comprehensive framework to achieve its objectives. But, as I've gone in other sessions, I've always said, there's no business decision that's made does not include the tax department. It should always include, right? Previous episodes, we talked about focusing on the concept of how tax leaders get a seat at the table, but it's really key to say that as they go through their day-to-day operation, you need tax to be focused in any strategy situation, right? If you decide that you're going to purchase or you're going to sell something, whether you're in business for products or services, right, it has a tax implication. The end result may be a non-taxable transaction, but the decision still needs to be determined whether there's tax based on that. And understanding that strategy really is very helpful to understand how it works with tax.
Absolutely. That's a great point. If we go back to some of those layers that we talked about, so enterprise strategy, go-to-market strategy, product, operational, there's certainly a tax implication in all of those. And I'll just throw a couple of examples out there. Imagine you have a sort of a youngish US company that is looking to extend their software as a service offering into Europe. Well, they need to make sure that they have that registration covered on their mind, making sure that they're addressing the compliance requirements, which are emerging day by day, as we both know, and make sure that they have all that considered before they go ahead and launch into the market. And so that's where making sure that they've consulted with tax early is really important, to make sure they're compliant from the outside, and they're not dealing with penalties and sort of getting in the way of operations once they're midstream. Another example, just to pick on another area of tax, imagine a company is setting up a new R&D facility, and while there are lots of decisions that go into that, right? What's the right location, real estate, construction, labor costs, etc. Tax factors such as R&D credits are a big consideration, especially at certain locations, and can have a really big financial impact and actually sway the decision. So it's just another example where tax is not always considered from the outside, but it's actually really important to bring that lens in very early on.
That's great. That's awesome. So, the areas that you touched on are key for a tax department to understand. Most tax departments solely look at compliance, reporting, right? But they understand what business leaders are thinking will help them get a seat at the table. And I can say that because if you're made aware of the direction of a business and its strategy, you can bring your tax expertise to the table to ensure these things. First, helping to know how the decisions of the organization are going to affect taxation is key. Second, how can you help reduce or eliminate the potential tax exposures? They happen all the time. They are two big areas. And if tax is brought into that strategy, they certainly can help to mitigate both of those areas.
Agreed, and I think what you're saying is very much, I think, what I was saying with some of the examples that I touched on. Often tax tends to be more of an afterthought, unfortunately, and it's actually much better to bring tax in early. And in some cases, it really influences sort of the design choices and the ultimate decisions that are taken. So, from the various hats you've worn over the years, maybe you can share a specific example where you've seen that tax wasn't brought in early enough and there were real sort of downstream consequences and business implications.
Yeah, yeah, I could do that because, like, just from a simple transaction, what a purchaser needs to understand when they're creating a purchase order, often tax is not included in that total purchase, right? One of those areas are the invoices come in and then they find that they're over budget, and it becomes such a large, complex issue because they didn't factor tax into that when they got approval for that. Here, when they know these things are happening, that's one area where they have to consider tax in setting up that purchase. You could also look on a larger scale, right? A business may decide to move to another location, set up a new facility, move across borders or states, right? But has the business discussed the indirect tax implications, right? Are you subject to higher taxes in a particular jurisdiction just because you moved over a county line or moved over a state? There are some reasons to have them at the table, and some of these areas are things that both tax and strategy should consider together.
Great examples, and it's very clear to me and hopefully to the audience that tax really does need to be incorporated upstream, and really has the ability to influence sort of the design decision, as I like to call it, alongside every other function and decision. And there's a material role to play in delivering strategy and shaping strategy and delivering strategy.
Absolutely, Neil. Yeah, and it's about shifting our mindset from viewing tax just as the burden that gets handed down from leaders, but recognizing what its strategic asset could be. By integrating tax throughout everything, we can unlock new opportunities and growth for the company to make sure that they have mitigated that. So I really appreciate time that you had with us today, Neil. Thanks for being here. It was a pleasure speaking with you. But until next time, everyone, have a great day.